Well, I guess we'll introduce ourselves. Guys, thanks for coming today. See you at noon. We're doing the follow-up Friday with the KREIA May meeting. We've got El Presidente, Chris McCarty, and Vice President, President-elect John Jones. John, do you have a car dealership? Someone was asking me about that.
No, but oddly enough, I went to school with the John Jones. I actually worked for him. He's 2 years older than me. And my freshman year, I worked at his pallet company. He was an entrepreneur even then. And then I ran into him probably 20 years later. Actually, I ran into his daughter, who was at a cheerleading competition where my daughters were, and I was working the competition. And just a funny story, she said she was from Salem, Indiana. And I said, oh, you don't know, by chance know John Jones, do you? And she said, oh, that's my daddy. I said, get out of here. I said, I went to school. Actually, I went to school with your daddy a few years ahead of me. So small world, but no. And I get asked that all the time. And I also say, I wish I had his money. So.
Well, and Chris owns motorcycles. He's right up in that niche.
I have a friend that is named John Jones also, a different John Jones. It's in my cell phone. I ride dirt bikes with him. He's a friend of mine. And I've called this John Jones before accidentally thinking I was calling the other one. So anyway, kind of common name. But yeah, John Jones, I did not know that story. I just assumed that was that Daddy started that. So that's interesting to know that he did all that.
Yeah.
Well, it's better than Jim Jones, am I right?
Yeah, exactly.
I've had that thrown at me a few times too, by accident. People repeating my names. Oh yeah, and here's Jim Jones. No, John Jones. So
who was it? I'm trying to remember. I don't know if it's Joanna or Ann. Sorry, I'm ADD, so I was thinking drinking the Kool-Aid, and then I was thinking to the story. But she wants to make like a sauerkraut cake or something, and at Woodhaven. I was like, hey, I'm sure we can request it, and they'll do it. But it was a weird cake and a weird request.
Sauerkraut, interesting.
I don't know why it triggered that. Anyway, so yeah, Sharon obviously is incredible. It's kind of amazing how many like nationally recognized people are in our market. Like Mike Butler, Sharon. I mean, it's crazy that we have people that are just killing it. I mean, I was at the Bigger Pockets conference in Nashville, and people were talking to me about Sharon. It's like, oh yeah, I mean, like she's in our KREIA, she's in our local market, Chicago. Yeah, she's a wealth of information. I like what of those techniques do you guys mind at anything like she does? Like off market?
Actually, I don't mind telling you, I follow her, and I'll give you a quick little to do on me. So when I got into this full time, and it was right around that 2009, 2010 time. I just rehabbed actually the house we live in. And I was like, I think I'm going to take my early retirement and I'm going to jump into, I love this. I love it. I love investing, but more on the rehabbing side before I gained a little bit more wisdom here in the last few years. But I started that and I was just going to do rehabs. And so I thought, I need to learn a little bit more. And I told the story last night. So this coach that I had been working with a little bit connected me to her. So I started following her blog, right? And I was like, oh, this is cool. And I started, and actually it was Mike Grennan who introduced me to KREIA. This all came together about the same time. And then I found out there she is. She sits, and you know where she sits. She sits at that same table just about every time. And it was I was almost a little bit awestruck at first, as odd as it may seem, because I'm like, oh man, here's this national speaker, and I'm like, all these people are around her and all this stuff. But so I finally did go up and introduce myself, and she's just as chill as she is. That's the way she is. But then I started following her blog, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going to do the things that she's saying. Now, I had jumped, when I first started, I was just going to rehab, and I'd rehab my first couple of houses beside the house I'm living in when I was doing this full time, and I then couldn't really find any good deals. And I thought, dang, I don't want to market. So I'm a perfect example of, that's not my thing, sales, it's like, well, I love being around people. That's not my thing. And I realized it had to become my thing or I wasn't going to be doing much. So I said, I basically pulled out of rehab and said, I got to start marketing. So that's what I did. I started putting stuff together, and I put together my first campaign was for Liz Pendens. And went out and I've learned how to look it up. So I've done, I do it all the manual method. I'll pull them in and I start sending all these letters out, right? So I had a nice little 3-letter thing that I did on the campaign. So I sent all this stuff out and I got calls, but it was mostly people that wanted to stay in their house and they didn't want to pay any money and they were just trying to figure out how to keep what they had and, looking for somebody to bail them out. And I was a rank rookie, right, in that side of things. So I'm just like trying to figure out, how to help them with short sales and, trying to figure this and that out. But then it just really didn't yield a lot. So I went, I'm going to pull. So I did that for about 6 months and I pulled back. What's interesting is about 3 months after I stopped sending out for Liz Pendens, because I realized it just wasn't being fruitful, I got so much return mail. It's crazy how many of those go out and the people are gone. They're not there, right? But so I started doing probate. I'm not familiar with probate, and I was a little leery of probate, and it was because of Sharon. So I went, okay, and I'd been following it. So I'm telling you this, you can follow. She'll share tidbit and tidbit and tidbit. And she shared enough of those. I'm like, well, I'm going to give this a try. So I did. And I'm very sensitive to that whole scenario. And so I put together some nice professional letters that I felt were sensitive to the situation. I sent those out. And she tells you, you've got to stay with it. Just, you've got to stay with it. So I started to learn the numbers, how many you send out, what should you be getting. I started tracking and I'll just tell you, I did everything she said you should do. And that's been my mainstay. That's been my primary properties that I acquire off market. That's where I do it. But she also hit on the things, networking. I bought several there from the club members, right? And it's not necessarily the wholesalers. It's been in the meetings, after the meetings, back talking. And it was interesting when I started kind of inventorying a few years ago, how many deals I was getting from where I was surprised how much we're networking. And it actually was my leader, networking. So I don't know who all's out on the call, but following what she ends up sharing and what happened, because I was on her email list, she had this thing down in Nashville about 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm like, I really need to work on this marketing thing. Here I'm trying to rehab and do all this stuff, but so I go down there and she offers a real nice, she has different things she does, but this happened to be just a general marketing, get your act together, here's what you should be doing kind of thing. And so that's what I did. And actually the folder's right over there, the marketing plan that I laid out, and I've been sticking to it. Now, have I gone as quick as I would like? No, but and that's why I think I mentioned last night, if you're trying to grow your business, if you're just going to onesie twosie it, come to the club and find a deal and move on, right? But if you really want to start to kick it up, and I do because I have people working for me regular, I need to keep enough houses going. So I want to keep the properties coming in. And it's then just a matter of, nothing's free, nothing's easy. And I know there's different people out there that teach that. It's work. It costs money. It takes time. But if you do it well and you do it consistently, you will start to then see the results coming in, and then you can adjust accordingly. She knows I'm an engineer. She knows I'm into the details. So I track every mailing we send out, every call that I get. I know what mailing it was in response to. And so also look and see if I have letters that don't seem to be garnering. I don't seem to be getting calls. I have to start looking at that. And do I need to adjust? So I'm still learning though. I'll consider myself a rookie who I've cast my line out, I've hooked some, but I keep casting that dude out. That's just what I recommend. She is very good. Sharon's very good at giving you some real good basics. What she gave last night is exactly what she then goes into detail in that one particular training. She just takes it into a little bit more detail. My website, and you probably know my website out there. It was because
your SEO is like some of the best in the city.
Yeah, and it was because I found out about Carrot from her. I'm like, Carrot, what the heck's this Carrot thing, right? So I connected up, and sure enough, so that's one of my lead pipes. And you've got to stay after it. Of course, our business is continuing to flux and change, but we just love the dynamics between my wife as a full-time realtor and me, because I can offer such good solutions to the folks. And Sharon has really just helped me with some of those basics along the way. And I've gone to some other things, and I come back to the basics that I learned from her stuff I'm continuing to stick with. So, yeah. And again, I don't know if people understand, for last night, we were really left hanging. We had someone else that had been scheduled, and it just wasn't working. And so Sharon, I called her at the last minute, and she has a crazy busy schedule. So I was so thankful that she was able to not only to jump in and help out, but she gives some really good stuff. So that's my kind of long story about Sharon, where I met Sharon and how much she's helped me.
Well, there's a couple of gold nuggets from what John just said. One, he approached her at the meeting. I mean, everybody likes to talk, so don't be intimidated to go talk to either of these guys. Like, just go say hi. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? Second, the networking was like a bigger part. So get there early, even if you're not going to go to the pre-meeting, go get a drink at the bar, hang out, like get to know people. I mean, I think that's like 90% of the fun. It's just getting to learn, because so many people are doing like such great things that we have no idea. And you're like, wow, I could implement this one thing in my business and it change a lot of things. I don't know. What about you, Chris? What are you doing for fishing, or are you fishing anymore? What are you looking at?
Well, as it relates to Sharon, Sharon alluded on the call that she became a wholesaler by accident back in the day when she was just kind of looking for properties. And I think I don't know that I ever bought anything, but I was one of the people that Sharon would send leads to. My approach was the opposite of John's, his methodical engineer approach. My approach was the ADD approach. So when I was actively buying houses back in the day, which I don't really do much anymore, I operated a retail business, so we were a little bit of a seasonal business. So it seemed like what I would always do in the off season, I'd get busy and go by hook or by crook, either referrals from KREIA members, commissioner sale, wholesalers, however, go buy 10 houses and be working on those for the next couple of years. Again, my model was buy and hold. So it would take a while to get those, 8, 10, whatever houses under my belt, into service, producing income, get busy in the retail world again, wait for the next off season, kind of go ramp up again, do the same thing. So I've known Sharon for all these years. I've been hanging around KREIA for all these years. Again, great resource. Kind of watched Sharon grow, I guess, over the years. I probably knew Sharon, before she was famous. But anyway, so yeah, she's just a great resource, great example, as John said, of information that you can get nuggets. You don't necessarily have to take her courses, and she shared so much with us last night. It was just awesome to hear it. She's not, the millennial, or I guess the younger, more tech savvy, social media presence is not necessarily Sharon's forte, although she has a presence. So anyway, it was just great to hear her approach. It still works, old school. Like hearing about the calendar on the wall, that sounds like something I would do. So good, a great presentation last night. And circle back to the whole KREIA thing. It's, again, the networking, what you just said about people coming early, it's just a great organization. And, other than your dues, it's a great way to, it doesn't cost anything, and great way to meet people and learn. And just can't say how many times and how many nuggets, as to use your term, that I've gotten from other KREIA members at the meetings.
Yeah, it's crazy. Plus, it just saves you a lot of money from making the same mistakes they made.
Yeah.
And that's
learn by other people's. But you and I were talking, Rob, before we got officially launched here, and the uncertainty of the times, and it's just so interesting. I don't want to get caught up in negativity, but we don't know what's going to happen. But 1,900 houses in inventory, everything's flying off the shelves, and I think things will, tighten up in the economy, but we are sure not seeing it now. Such a shortage of inventory, so many people in the marketplace trying to buy stuff, driving up the cost and prices. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier was that people in California and these other crazy markets, the incomes are not necessarily higher than they are here. I had some inside knowledge of a company in just outside of San Francisco a few years ago, and the jobs that were being done out there compared to the jobs that were being done here in my industry, non-real estate industry, the people were not really making any more money, but they were spending 2 and 3 and 4 times to buy the house, the same house that our people were buying here. So really, what does that mean about our Louisville market? I think the Louisville market is catching up. It's not going to stop. I look back over my 20-something year history in real estate, prices never go down. And you think like, well, how do these prices keep going up? I mean, that's the question everybody asks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look at California. They kept going up in California. The wages did not track with the price of the houses. People still bought houses. They still figure it out. It's still the American dream. So I just don't see it changing, and I don't see big wage increases anywhere. I think we're going to see some inflation pressure before all this stuff is over with the printing press that's going on. Again, I failed economics and I wasn't very good at the concepts, but it does make sense that there has to be a consequence from all this money being printed over time, which in our industry is going to equal higher appreciation in real estate, which is going to mean higher rents if that's what you're doing, or higher flips or whatever. So as a real estate investor, I think it's good. As a consumer, it's going to be bad. But I got my real estate hat on and I like it.
Well, you got to think, if you own, I mean, like, I guess I talked about it on the last call with Mike, the income gap, like, is crazy, like, between the people that have money and the people that don't. And apparently it tracks higher in cities. Property values go up where you have a larger income gap. Mm-hmm. We have a huge income gap here in Louisville. So conceivably, the people that own the most, like all these rentals, are going to rule the roost and just elevate, and then they're going to have crazy equity, be able to refinance, buy more stuff. I mean, if there was ever a time to get in the game, like, get in the game. I have this new client from Phoenix, and I have 6 under with him in the last week and a half, and he's just buying everything. Like, I think he's just, like, all this outside money, like, it's coming. Like, I don't know. Frank Miller had something in his belief. He was hosting. He said, we're 2 or 3 years behind, like, the West Coast and East Coast. And, like, it seems like we are catching up with them.
Yeah, yeah.
I hope we stay way behind them.
Well, most of those places have, like, if you look at, like, Texas and, like, Austin and Houston, they have all this flat land to build. Like, we don't have that. Like, mm-hmm. I don't know. And then, I don't know, when I have all these calls with out-of-state people, and I always say, we really don't have any natural disasters. We have natural limestone, so we don't have, like, water heaters. We don't really get floods and tornadoes. I mean, sand, 1937. So, I mean, like, we're pretty insulated, like, just on variables. Like, it's just very safe. I don't know. We just need our tech industry to keep moving, and then we'll be fine as a whole.
A couple of things that this is a national phenomenon in just Louisville, and again, sort of being an older demographic, it really caught me off guard, and I've probably ranted about this to others before. That Shelby Park is a perfect example of. I never saw it coming. I just didn't see it, and it still surprises me, even though I'm finally getting on board with it. Shelby Park was where I thought nobody would want to live. Everybody, in my demographic, my age group, suburbia, mm-hmm. Big brick houses, nice lots. I really just wasn't thinking about what, Rob, your generation wanted. Yeah. And, it sort of almost bypassed me because it just didn't make any sense to me what was happening down there until it was happening. And then you start seeing it, everybody's moving back in. They like the closeness. They like the sidewalks. They like the neighborhood feel and all that. And I mean, it's a miracle what's happened down in Shelby Park. And, there's such diversity down there. But you'll see extreme ends of the economic spectrum down there. a baby stroller next to a drug transaction, and it's crazy, but
it is wild. But I think we should have saw it. I mean, after we saw that, like what happened with just connecting downtown with Nulu to the Highlands, I always explain it like it's a circle, and then it went to Germantown, and now it's coming to Shelby Park, and then it's working its way back. So you're going to have this. I mean, it kind of makes sense in hindsight, but I mean, I didn't think anything of Shelby Park 3 or 4.
Yeah, you couldn't see it, when it was first happening. Now exactly hindsight, and then the same thing, with the pressure that's on the rest of the markets now. That's the rising tide lifting all boats, and all is great, and you can hardly go wrong anywhere. And so then you'd be thinking about this conversation. You're like, well, how can it go south, given all these COVID things that are going on? It's hard to imagine how it could, but again, everybody just needs to be mindful that it still could, and there's still problems on the horizon to be dealt with.
Well, you got to think the rent's going to start. The rent's not going to correlate with purchase price anymore. I think that you're going to see a big gap there. The things are going to look really great on paper, like when you look at the refinance, the amount of money you're going to have to keep in the deal to cash flow. You got to be real mindful of that, I think, coming forward.
Not to monopolize, but one more point here. Chris Distinger and I had this conversation not too long ago about back when we were first getting started. We were borrowing money at River City Bank at 10%. That was sort of like the cookie cutter program. When I first got started, I went down to River City Bank, and they're like, yeah, we'll loan you the money. You got to put 20% down, and it's 10% interest on a 10-year amortizing loan. That was the program. So think about a 10-year fully amortizing loan with 10% interest, and try to make that work on a cash flow basis. So today or yesterday, I just signed a guidance line with a local bank for 3.75% on basically 80% of value, not 80% loan, 80% of value at 3.75% fully amortizing loans for 20 years. I mean, you just can't beat this interest rate climate. It's just crazy.
But what this is going to do, though? Yeah, all right. So what is it, like 40% of our market is rentals? Those houses, people burned them and made them really nice, but those people are going to have no reason to throw any money. Like those are going to become the eyesores in the neighborhood in the next 10 years. It's going to be I don't know. It's cool to
say that again. Again.
So you have all these burrs that are like being done in like all kinds of areas. Right. Well, those people, since they're on 20-year terms, like they're never going to, like they're not going to throw more money into making it look more up to date and more, like they're just going to sit on that for 20 years or maybe do some work in the refi again. Whereas the owner occupants are going to keep on upgrading. So if we keep on getting this outside pressure from all these out-of-state people, like if it gets to like a 50-50 split or 60-40, I mean, you're just going to see a slowdown on change.
And I hear a lot about the out-of-towners as well. As a matter of fact, I know people associated with the club who've come to me and said, look, if you know somebody that has a group of properties, let me know. I mean, they've got out-of-state buyers, which is good for them. But to me, it's like, stay away.
No.
Leave us alone.
When I went out and hosted that happy hour with David Green in California, I brought bundles of like 36 million in off-market REIT. And I don't think I could create those anymore because everyone's seeing how much they're appreciating. They're like, I'm going to hold on to these guys. But it is a good way to get rid of your duds. I mean, they're not managing their own stuff, so they're like just handing it off to the property management companies. But right. Yeah, I mean, I just did a post in the KREIA group I literally put up the bat signal. I thought that was so funny, to me at least. And just saying, hey, I need bundles. And Harry Borders put up the same thing. So I'm guessing we have the same client.
I mean, is there even bundles out there? Have you seen any bundles, Rob? I mean,
Hampton will always put something together because he's always just trying to. I mean, he just people are bringing him deals all the time. But I didn't have anybody respond to my post, which I was kind of shocked about because last time when I went out to California, which is like 2 years ago now, I had 38 million in off-market bundles. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It's crazy. Like Main Street Renewal, they're willing to buy it like 110%. Like they don't even care for cash flows. And the crazy thing is it's a hedge fund, but they're playing with the pensions of like the Arizona Teachers Association. which if they're willing to buy at 110%, that seems like bad business to me, but I don't know.
Well, you know, when they were first came around, I heard about Main Street Renewal, and I thought it was the craziest notion, because we were coming out of the recession, and here these people were, you know, we know what we know, or we know what we think we know, and we were coming out of the recession, and I just couldn't understand what these people were doing and where this money was coming from and why they were doing it. Well, fast forward through the circle, the stock market has corrected, and what's happened to every one of those properties that they bought? You know, they're probably doubled in value from where they first bought them. But it was a new concept. We had never seen anything like that before in the market. Where was this money coming from? And who did these people think they were, that they could come into our market and pay these kind of prices? They were going to fail. Absolutely. It was just a matter of time. But
long enough timeline.
Yeah, it was perfect. And Blackstone doing the same thing. The Blackstone, Blackworth, Blackstone,
something. Yeah.
Yeah, Blackstone, I think, largest homeowner in the United States, and Main Street Renewal, they have operations in about 6 different cities in the country.
Last time I checked, they were at like 200 something doors.
In Louisville, yeah. And you look at their website, and that's a good exercise for any KREIA member, by the way. Go to mainstreetrenewal.com, click on Louisville, and just look at their inventory and the prices that they're asking. I mean, they're not bashful in their prices, and it's good, solid houses that they buy. Over there off Lower Hunters Trace, the area, can't think of the subdivision, the vinyl houses there that were built by, anyway, those things went through the foreclosure sale by the dozens and dozens of those houses went through the foreclosure sale at $30,000, $40,000, and $50,000. Main Street Renewal is paying $120,000 for those houses and renting them for $1,800 a month. Yeah, never would. Look at their website, John. Just, you want a wake-up call, just look at their website and see the property.
Wow.
We got really lucky with them, with the Branch brothers. We had one there. It was like their first flip ever on El Dorado, and that's when they decided they were not flippers. We got a full price above asking offer from them, and we had other offers, but we accepted theirs. They forgot about their inspection timeline, so they usually what they would do is get it under contract and then ask for a price reduction during inspection. They forgot about their inspection, so we ended up getting the above asking, everything we wanted. They got really lucky on their first flip.
And that was a Main Street deal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, I think for somebody like me who came into the buy and hold later, right? Or lately, whatever you want to say. So I've my first rental I bought 5 years ago, and I then started realizing about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, I started realizing the value, and then I really saw it this past year. I'm like, oh my gosh, because I had been adding, and my concern was, man, I don't have enough time before the rates go up. Well, that's before all this craziness, right? Because I was like, man, I got to get them while I can. Got to get them. So I'll just say right now, I'm looking at this as borrowed time, because to your point earlier, Chris, a lot of people, I don't know who else on this call, but shoot, 10% was a great rate. You know, that's the scary thing. Most people don't realize we were up in the 16%, 13. I remember when it got down to 13% and you had to buy that down. We couldn't even afford to buy a house at that time. It was just so crazy. And so I'm looking at these rates going, number one, I didn't think we'd see what we're seeing today. A year ago, there's no way I would have said, there's no way it could go any lower. We have to be heading up. And so to see it, to me right now, is just like, all right, we need to leverage it. And I think Eric Kitzelberger is the one he's so darn good with the numbers, and he showed, you know, the value, you know, the percentage rate and what your ability to buy is. And I'm like, you know, we just need to take advantage of what we have in front of us and what's coming. And like I say, we don't really know what's coming. There's speculation, but so again, I just think instead of I'm always half full. I'm just a positive. I'm not like Rob, but I'm pretty darn positive. So I'm just looking at, okay, let's don't be foolish, but let's kind of just get ready for where things are going. Let's take advantage of it. It's a good market right now. I just think we have to take the information we have and make wise decisions. And everybody's position is different. Everybody, you know, either they're just starting, they've been around forever. I mean, look here, look at this, look at the three of us sitting here. I mean, all three totally different situations. However, we're all dealing in the same market. So we have to figure out how it's going to work for each of us. Speculation and going forward. So I'm just trying to figure out what looks like the good path. Go ahead.
A certain guy in this Zoom call is going to get a lot more business in the near future. Mark Haas is on the call. I mean, there has to be, people have to be over leveraging and overextending themselves right now to get these purchase prices on the MLS. So, I mean,
so there, to that point, kind of, I had the same question, Rob, but then at the beginning of our call, we started talking about the likely continued appreciation of these houses. So it's kind of back what's happened in the past. If you're not terribly over leveraged, you can sort of outweight your problem if you can make the house cash flow. A lot of what happened in the 08 was people just got upside down so fast. When a tenant moves out, they're incapable of maintaining their mortgage payments because they don't have rent coming in. So I would think that the same thing is likely to happen now. People that are terribly over leveraged, they hit a little bump in the road, they get a couple of vacancies, and to anybody that's new on the call, it always costs more than a month's mortgage payment to put a house back on the market. When you turn it and fix it and clean it and repair whatever, you know, it's probably $6,000 or $7,000 per turnover in my business. So it's an expensive proposition when you lose tenants and you're highly leveraged and you don't have any cash reserves.
Do you think you're going to see? I know people used to be predators in this situation where they would do reverse mortgages, but do you think people that don't understand about refis are going to start doing reverse mortgages because they have I read something when I had that talk with Mike that people are equity rich but cash poor.
Is there even a market for reverse mortgages for people other than seniors that are just using their primary residence? And I may not know about this, using their primary residence for income?
I don't know. I mean, like 90% of the time, I think it's a bad buy to do the reverse mortgage thing.
Yeah, I agree.
But but if you're at the end of your life and you don't have kids or anything, like, why not enjoy yourself? I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. But I mean, I think, and then the question is, okay, so I always think of It's a Wonderful Life, you know, where the banks are shutting down. Everyone came to get their money because, you know, whatever. I'm kind of forgetting it. But do you think that could happen with people refining too? I mean, they're just pulling like 80,000 out and 40,000 out and 20,000 out. I mean, are the banks going to be able to handle everybody just pulling out all this equity?
Well, it's what happened in 2008, and everybody took a haircut. The banks got hit hard, and it really, if you think about it, that's what's already happened, and the market always finds its own level. And during the 08 foreclosure crisis that was going on, the prices fell by 20-30%. Everybody jumps back in, rides it up again, and it's quite possible it'll just happen again. I mean, 2008 was bad. Hopefully we don't see anything like that again, and we can continue to bank on some appreciation for the real estate that we have.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. I mean, we're very insulated too. That short supply. If we have 4,000, 5,000 houses on the market, I bet we'd be feeling some certain way, maybe a little bit more. But I don't know. I don't know. But the scary thing is, people are having a hard time. Like, they're able to get crazy top dollar for what they're selling their house, but they can't find affordable houses on their end either. So it's tough.
And the good thing is, right now we have the advantage of we have a good market. So if investors are not in a real sweet position but they have properties, there's an opportunity to move them now, which I don't think even existed back in 2008. I think that that went out the window. I don't mind telling you, it almost was enough to scare me away. I was down at the auction, and I had some friends who they had multiple properties, multiple rehabs going, and they're still in the business today, but they took a bath, man. And so, but they didn't have an out. they did not have an option of a market like we still currently have to sell anything. And they couldn't rent. So that was one of those lessons I happened to learn, even though I wasn't looking at being a landlord. But I saw that what they went to try and rent was too pricey and they couldn't cover their cost. And so that's what, just took them down even further. So again, I think this is a little bit unique in that, people can potentially, if they're not underwater completely, they can potentially still raise some cash in this current market. What do you think, Chris?
Hopefully you're right, John. It is still scary though. I just don't have the answer. I want to, preach, I guess, to everybody again to just be careful and be mindful that we don't know what the other side of this COVID crisis could look like. And there's so much cash flying around out there right now. It's this false sense of security. There are not people, losing their jobs. They're losing their jobs, but there's compensation. They're being paid. They're being propped up through all these programs. So, I mean, if we end up with long-term, very high unemployment, we will feel this. And it's a supply and demand thing. So it's just hard to, even though I failed economics, I still have a hard time understanding how long-term high unemployment can sustain increasing values of real estate. The two are just so incongruent. So I just say, be careful. I mean, as a KREIA participant and board member and president and lecturer and a giver of advice, I just, again, caution everybody to take a pause and realize that these are propped up times that we're in right now, and we have possibly some rough times ahead, and to be careful. And if you've got an opportunity to not make that purchase or not part with that cash, it just seems prudent to me to do so.
And that's my point. So did you have any opportunity like this? See, I didn't have to deal with it. I didn't have anything on the hook. So when everything went south, I just pulled back and I was just okay. What I'm saying is, when that happened then, do you feel there was opportunity to help position yourself better in case?
Well, it's like the stock market. Your hindsight says when the stock market plunges, you jump in. When everybody's running away, you run in. The same thing happened in 2008. It was really hard. That's going back to the conversation about Main Street renewal. It was hard to understand what those people were doing to be paying top dollar for that real estate at that time, when the rest of us were so afraid and puckered up and scared that, this thing was going to continue and we were going to all go down. So they ran in when everybody else, myself included, because at the time it didn't look like an opportunity. And I may have shared this a couple of calls back, that it took me a while because this thing was so omnipresent in my life, this crisis that was going on, and I did survive it, but it was painful. It cost a lot of money to survive it. It was so omnipresent in my life, I couldn't see the change that was happening out there with the appreciation. I was still in the negative glass is half full mode, just trying to stay alive and make sure that I didn't crash and burn. I couldn't see it when it was happening. So to answer your question in a roundabout way, it's a mental thing. You have to trust that when everybody else is leaving, you have to know, even though it feels like exactly the wrong thing to do, you have to figure out how to run towards what everybody else is running away from. And mentally, it's hard to do that. If you're just trying to survive and there's opportunity, it doesn't look like opportunity when you're just worried about surviving.
Well, so I didn't articulate this well, I can tell. Here's what I'm thinking. Maybe I'm just missing it here, but I'm tracking with you, because I don't mind telling you, I'm listening to you. I'm listening to others who've been through some of this, and I'm like, man, I hear you, and I want to be prepared. What I don't think there was an obvious opportunity in 2008. I think there is right now to better position your portfolio in case the times do get rough. That's my point. Is and just like me, I don't mind telling you, I already was starting to get away from some of the higher end properties that I'm rehabbing because I don't want to be left holding them.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm like, whoop, I've passed up some opportunities. I've got a couple I've had too long. I'm moving on. You're going to see, well, actually, the one I'm showing you won't be too long. I've got one I've had for quite some time. I've got to get moved. I think I've got a little window, is my point. I think I've got a little time. We've had this warning. We've all been locked down, but the market still seems to be decent. I'm going to move those. And I guess what I was thinking was, if I had some properties that weren't necessarily great rentals, and I think Rob was kind of made me think about this. If I had some that weren't great rentals but had a little bit of cash in them, I could sell them in this market now, go ahead and get them moved and have some cash to sit on to get through this time. And so that's what I'm thinking. I don't think in 2008 there was any kind of warning. I think we're getting all kinds of warnings here now for something coming, right? And so I'm thinking, I think as investors, we just have to look at our individual situations. Like mine is, get rid of these big retail properties I have. I need to move them. I'm gonna hold on to my rentals. I'm good with them. They're in good shape. I have good tenants. I'm not going to mess with any of that. But I am very concerned if all of a sudden the bottom fell out tomorrow, I'd be sitting on these properties. They couldn't cash flow. They'd be negative cash flow. So that's my particular situation. And I'm thinking if others are just leveraged pretty highly, they could potentially sell some of their properties and reposition before whatever's going to happen happens. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And again, I guess it's an individual decision. And, whether you're 60% leveraged or 70% leveraged, that's not a lot of, that really isn't going to solve a lot of your problems if the bottom falls out. Having cash because you liquidated, some of these problematic properties, it's just so much better to have a little bit of cash so that you don't ever have to go ahead and hand to the bank and say, I need, some relief. I can't make these payments. I need a deferment plan. And then later on, the banks won't forget that. I mean, that's going to be a permanent record that you're going to have to deal with over time if you've had to go. Again, cash is king. It's a corny saying, but it's so true. And if you can have a little cash laying around for a rainy day. I had a banker tell me one time when I was so highly leveraged, he's like, Chris, you don't have any cash. I'm like, yeah, but look at all this equity I have. And he goes, well, so we're not going to loan you any money in a crisis on that equity. We're just we want our payments. So I don't know, just cash is important, particularly in uncertain times. And until I lived through 2008, I didn't understand that. And maybe it's just, an old guy now that has got that experience that I just never want to feel those feelings again. So I'm just trying to position myself appropriately.
So what was the first thing you thought of when you realized we've got some bumpy roads ahead? In your position, knowing you've been through it, just give us rookies, right? Seriously, I say that sincerely. So what were the first things? Cash is king is one thing, but what were you really thinking? How much cash do I need? What do I need to do to prepare?
I mean, everybody has to look at their own situation, but I would think you need to have access to or cash, real cash or lines of credit that cannot be taken away from you to last you for 3 or 4 or 6 months worth of, and I don't mean to sound like Mr. Naysayer here, but these are just realistic. Warren Buffett is sitting on $130 billion in cash, not necessarily for a rainy day because he doesn't have any place better to put the money. So 3, 4, 6 months worth of cash or access to cash that nobody can take away from you. One story that I would share, not to get too deep in the weeds, but I had a $1 million line of credit with a local bank that I didn't have a balance on when all this was going down. And I went in and I asked the banker, I said, what sort of concern should I have about this line of credit being called? And I didn't like the answer that he gave me. He said, Chris, I don't know. This was when it was all really, coming down around everybody. Bankers were running, everybody was afraid. He says, Chris, I don't know what could happen, but I left his office thinking they could very well call this line of credit. That line of credit is what I am banking on to get through this crisis. The next day, I went into a different branch, got a cashier's check for that amount of money that was on my line of credit, and went over to River City Bank and deposited it. With the idea, and again, I'm not trying to be flippant about it, but it's a lot harder for the bank to come get the money than it is to just turn the line of credit off.
Yeah.
And you know, that might be an inappropriate thing for a KREIA president to say, but that's what I did, you know, once upon a time.
And it worked out. You're still standing.
Yeah, still standing. And I did have to use that money. And I used it prudently. I got through the crisis. Had the bank taken that opportunity away from me, I'm not sure I would be sitting in this chair today.
You'd have to stand because you couldn't afford the chair, right?
Yeah, right.
Well, one thing I think it's important, I was thinking about, I'm ADD, like I said, but there's a lot of great, successful people in the club. All ships rise. So, I mean, support other people in the club. I mean, we have a great vendors list of electricians, plumbers, GCs, everything. Like, reach out to those people because they're the people that are giving you advice and telling you what's going on in the market. So I definitely recommend supporting all the vendors. And so can you, before we click out, could you tell people what the process is for the election that's coming up?
Michelle Ron, the elections are closed now after last night. She's not accepting any more nominees. So the membership will be getting a ballot and instructions from Lauren on how to go about placing your ballot. I think it's going to be a bit of an electronic process where you may have to log in as a member on the website and get the information. And Michelle also put out last night that if you don't want to go through all that, that she can email you a ballot. You can print it out, fill it out, and email it back to her. Michelle's going to have to get some help counting these ballots. And I worry a little bit that there's going to be low attendance on the election because of the COVID situation and the virtualness that we're under. So I just encourage everybody to, exercise your right, participate. We don't have a great large slate of people that are running like we did last year, but still I think there are 8 people running for 6 board seats, and then the officers are running unopposed. So personally, I look forward to getting back to normal and being able to bump elbows or shake hands or look people in the eye and have our regular meetings again. I do miss it, and I feel like there's something lost in the translation in the Zoom type meetings that we're having to do now, which we're still going to have for a couple more months. But I do want to say that John Jones, the hero of the day yesterday, did an epic, awesome job of running that meeting, pulling it off, making it all happen despite crisis after crisis and pivot after pivot to make it all work. And good job, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, and yeah, we definitely had a few things happen, but we made it happen, and hopefully we'll learn from it, and next meeting will be smoother. One of the things coming out of all this, some of the stuff like this here with Rob, and I mentioned, and actually I forgot to give Lauren the credit for the name, the demo day that we're going to have. I think, some of the online efforts now are going to yield even better tools. I hope that folks, and we just need to publish this more, realize what all Lauren is doing out there on the website. She's now putting stuff out there the way I wanted to see it when I first came to KREIA, because I was like, hey, and we're going down this path. I mean, we're getting more education out there, more stuff that you have hands-on. A lot of times I can't wait to get to a meeting because I want to go ask Chris something, or I want to go ask Joe something, or I want to go ask, we have such great resources there, whether it's during the meeting, after the meeting. And so I share all that to say some of that stuff has been shared in the past, but it's not where we can go back and get to it. So I'm hoping that we're going to be able to change that with, again, what work Lauren's doing feverishly in the background to get some of this information out there where you can then go bring it up, slide to where you want to go, click on it, and listen. So we're working on those things. I think the club in that regard is going to be so much better off as a result. I think this is just kind of,
be a little quicker.
yeah, it's really just kicking us on down this path. So Chris has been so supportive of Lauren and moving in that direction. So I think the whole club's going to benefit. And but boy, it's very obvious when you talk to other REIAs, National REIA and the other REIA. I almost think they should be, if they're not envious of our meeting the way it is, and the intimacy, for lack of a better term, of us all coming together. And it's really a great social opportunity where you can get education. I cannot even tell you how many times the best thing I heard was sitting just talking in a group of folks. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go apply that. I need to use that on my rentals. And oh my goodness, I didn't realize I needed to make sure in a trust I had this listed properly on my insurance. And I mean, I just constantly pick stuff up. So yeah, great. I love KREIA. I think we've got a great group of folks, and a great, just in general, all the folks who participate, just good people. I don't know. That's the way I see it.
Think about this. Now they get to watch everybody age, gain weight, lose their hair, and that'll be a lot. That'll be entertaining in of itself.
Good point.
Good point. Yeah.
One thing that I think might actually be good is what maybe I can do that Thursday Zoom call and have all the candidates on, give them like 2 minutes to answer maybe 3 or 4 questions, roll through the gang, and then we'll have those. I guess the election will probably be staggered since it's digital Thursday, Friday, but give everybody a chance to get to know people, or maybe they know the name, but they don't know the face, or they know the face and they can put them together. That might be a good tool.
Yeah, that'd be great, Rob. Yeah.
Well,
I don't
awesome.
know what the actual, just to that point, I don't know what the schedule is of how much time people are going to have. So if you're going to do that, then we just need to make sure it's prior to everybody receiving their ballot in time for people to vote. And yeah, so that's a great idea, though.
We can learn it. I'll get with Michelle and just shoot out an email and then see who's willing to come and maybe reach out to you guys, create a couple questions for them. But awesome. I think this one would be a good one to rewatch, so I'll make sure that I'll spam it out. Thanks again for coming on, guys, and we'll see you soon at noon. See you guys.
All right, Rob. Thank you so much.
Take care. See you guys.